So, Boker Tov, today's Daf Yomi is Nedarim Daf Ayin Zayin, Nedarim 77. Daf Yomi tells us, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Chacham she'amar b'lashon Baal, Baal she'amar b'lashon Chacham, lo amar klum. Rabbi Yochanan says, if a Chacham comes to annul a vow, we know that that there are two ways to cancel a vow. One is through what's called Hataras Nedarim. Hatara, like untying something. So basically, that you go to the sage, and the sage can untie the vow. It's like untying a knot, and so therefore, it was though the vow was never there in the first place. That's called Hataras Nedarim, and we learned that can be done through either regret, charata, or a pesach, or finding an opening. But there's another way to annul a vow, and that is through hafaras nedarim. That's when either the father or the husband rejects the vow, cancels the vow on the day that he hears it. So Rabbi Yochanan teaches us that a chacham, if he says it, if he uses the language of the husband, shamar b'lashon baal, i.e., he says hefer, he says the vow is rejected, or baal shamar b'lashon chacham, or the husband who says in the expression of the chacham, "Lo amar klum," they've said nothing. Meaning, say there are two separate, even though these annulments and this cancellation look like they're the same thing, they're not the same thing, and you have to use the precise language in enacting it. The Tanya and the Gemara is going to say two brisos that support this. The chacham can annul a vow, but the husband does not annul a vow. I might have said, just like a chacham who's not capable of rejecting a vow, he's not capable of canceling the vow. Matir is capable of annulling. Baal shemefer, the husband who is capable of rejecting or canceling, eno din shematir. For sure, the husband should also be able to annul the vow. The verse says, with respect to vows, this is the matter. Chacham matir ve'em baal matir. The chacham can do annulment of the vow, but the husband cannot. We're on the top of 78a. One of the differences, when you annul a vow, you cancel it retroactively. It's as though the vow was never made in the first place. We're going to see practical distinction about that in a few days. Where let's say the vow was annulled, then if you had if you had violated the vow, but then the vow was annulled, so you never did it, so you're not going to be liable. Whereas when the husband canceled the vow, it's just from that point onward that the vow is canceled. So chacham matir ve'em baal matir. Tanya idach, but there's an alternative price. So the alternative price says zeh davar, and this is the matter which it states by the laws of vows. Baal mefer ve'em chacham mefer. The husband can annul a vow. The husband can cancel or reject a vow, but the chacham cannot cancel or reject a vow. The chacham can only annul a vow. Sheyachol, I might have said, ma baal shein matir mefer. I might have said, just like the husband who can't annul can cancel. Chacham shematir, the chacham who can annul, eno din shemefer. For sure, he can cancel. Tamalomer zeh davar. This is the matter. Baal mefer ve'en chacham mefer. The husband can cancel, i.e., reject, but not the chacham. So now the Gemara says, let's talk about this verse, zeh davar, which is said in the passage of vows, but it's also said in the passage, these two words are also said in the passage of what's called the prohibition of shlutei chutz. What's shlutei chutz? That there is a commandment that if you have a sacrificial animal, a sacred animal, that's dedicated or sanctified to the temple, it needs to only be slaughtered within the courtyard of the temple. If you take this animal which was sanctified and you slaughter it outside of the temple courtyard, then it is called the violation of shlutei chutz. Shlutei, slaughtering chutz outside of the temple. If you do it accidentally, you have to bring a carbon. If you do it intentionally, you're liable for the severe penalty of kares. So the same words appear in both places. Zeh davar appears by shlutei chutz, and nemar la'aron zeh davar. So it appears by vows and appears by shlutei chutz. Appears in both places. So now the Gemara is going to tell us, the Brisa states, zeh davar b'shlutei chutz What's the comparison? Ma b'shlutei chutz aron uvanav v'kol Yisrael. Just like by when the prohibition of shlutei chutz, it applies to Aaron and his sons and all of Israel, because the verse says about shlutei chutz, speak to Aaron and his sons and all of Israel and say to them, Zeh hadavar, this is the matter. So too, af parashas Nedarim, Aaron uvanav v'kol Yisrael. So the Gemara says we're going to do what's called a gzeira shava. We're going to compare the words in both places, just like the words appear by Aaron, that when it appears by shlutei chutz, the word Zeh hadavar is said in the context of Aaron and his sons and all of Israel. So too, we're going to say that the same laws apply by vows. Now, when it says the laws of vows apply to Aaron and his sons and all of Israel, the Gemara is going to explain what that means. And so too, Ma'kan Rashi Matos, just like when it comes to the laws of vows, it says in the context of Zeh Davar, it says there's a Gemara's over there in that shelf. One to the left of the clock and one down, right there. To the left of the clock and one down. No, to the right. Straight, right where your finger is. Yeah, we're on top of 78A. So just like Boker Tov, my friend drove through the night just to say the Daf Yomi together. He's such a righteous man. So it says, just like it says here, Rashi Matos, in the passage of the vows, it says the heads of the tribes. Aflawan, so too, it says the heads of the tribes. We're going to apply these words, Rashi Matos, that apply the heads of the tribes that appear in the passage of vows. We're going to apply it also to Aaron and his sons and all of his children. So the Gemara says, well, the parashas Nedarim Mamai Hilchasa. So the Gemara says, okay. So now we know we have a gzeira shava that Aaron and his sons and all of Israel applies. It said by shlutei chutz, we're applying it to vows. So what do we learn from that? Why do we care that it's applied to vows? What's the halacha that it's teaching us? So the parashas Nedarim Mamai Hilchasa. So Amar Avacha Bar Yaakov V'Hachshir Shlosha Diotos. It's to tell us. It's the reason why it says Aaron and his sons and all of his children. It's to tell us that even though you don't have, when it comes to the court case that you need to annul the vows, the bet din that's needed to annul the vows, we don't need 3 expert judges. 3 hediotas. A hediot is a regular folk, a commoner. It doesn't mean you don't know anything, but it means you don't have to be the biggest expert in vows in order to sit on the court to annul the vows. And that's what we do today after services on Erev Rosh Hashanah. We get 3 regular folk from the minyan, and we annul the vows. Gemara says, but how can you just do with 3 regular folk? It says that it needs the heads of the tribes to annul the vows. Last night we were studying with Rav Betzal, and he cited the sources. He cited the source that what's the reason why we use heads of the vows? Because we don't want people to know all the laws. Why does it say the heads of the tribes? Because specifically we don't want people to know all the heads, all the laws, because if they know the laws, then they're going to be too flippant with respect to making the vows, because they're going to realize how easily they can annul it. So that's why I think he said the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. That's why we specifically say the heads of the tribes. So the Gemara here gives a different explanation. Amarav Chesda V'Teima Rabbi Yochanan B'Yachad Mumchad. No, why do we need the heads of the tribes? That if you have a specific individual, you can annul the vows with just a specific individual. That's if the individual is an expert. Where it says, okay, well, if that's the case, so what are we going to do when we do the Gzeira Shava? We take the words Rashi Amatos, the heads of the tribes that appear by vows, and we apply it also to the prohibition of Shlutei Chutz. What's the point of it? To tell us a very unusual law. You might have thought that if you go and you slaughter this animal outside the temple, you have no choice. You're fried. Yeah, you're done. You're out of luck. No, but there is a loophole. There's a loophole. What could you do? You could go to the chacham or go to the court and ask that your sanctification of this animal be revoked. You say retroactively, I want to say I never actually sanctified this animal. I didn't intend to do it. And so then the animal won't be considered sacred. And so therefore you didn't slaughter a sacred animal outside the temple. So it's to teach us that you have this loophole as it relates to Shlutei Chutz. You can undo a sin. So to speak, it's like the time turner from Harry Potter. You have ability to turn back the clock. So the Gemara says, well, Beis Shammai, the Amar Ein Sheila Behektish. Well, according to Beis Shammai, who says that there's no such concept as Sheila Behektish, that there's no such concept as undoing the the sanctification when it comes to the sacred items. So why, according to him, why does it say the heads of the tribes by this? What do we learn from that with respect to the prohibition of slaughtering outside the temple? So the Gemara says, well, Beis Shammai leisu gzera shava. Beis Shammai doesn't actually compare Rashi Matos by Nedarim to Rashi Matos by Shlutei Chutz. Gzera shava, this teaching from Gzera shava, you have to have a tradition about it from your teachers about which words could be applied, and Beis Shammai didn't have that tradition. So he says there's no Gzera shava there, so I don't have to learn anything about Rashi Matos to Shlutei Chutz. So if that's the case, Zeh Davar b'Parshas Nedarim u'Ma'aksiv. So according to Beis Shammai, why does it say Zeh Davar by the passage of the vows? According to the first approach, we said that the word Zeh Davar was said by Parshas Nedarim to teach us this Gzera Shava that you could even use 3 hedyotos, 3 regular folk. But according to Beis Shammai, doesn't it say there's a Gzera Shava? So why does he say it was written? He says it's to tell us, Omar Chacham Matir Vein Baal Matir. He says, teach us this idea that only the Chacham can annul the vow, but not the husband. Baal Mefer, only the husband can reject the vow, Ve'ein Chacham Mefer, but the Chacham can't do Afara. And Zeh Davar B'Shlutei Chutz L'Ma'ihil. But so according to Beis Shammai, it doesn't say there's a Gzera Shava. What's the reason why it says the word Zeh Davar by the prohibition of slaughtering outside the temple? Ama'iksiv. He says, I'll tell you why it was written. To tell us that you're only liable for slaughtering an animal outside the temple. And we know, generally speaking, that when a bird is offered in the temple, a bird is not slaughtered. The fowl is not slaughtered, but it is killed through the process of malika, where the Kohen sticks his thumb through the back of the neck of the baby bird in order to kill it. So you might have thought that the prohibition of Shlutei Chutz as it applies to a fowl outside the temple requires malika and not slaughter. So we say, no, it's just the opposite. It applies to slaughter, but if you do malika outside the temple, you're not liable. So the Gemara says, okay, fine. Beis Shammai. So since Beis Shammai does not use this Gzera Shava, how does Beis Shammai know this concept of? How does Beis Shammai know this concept of Gimel Hadyotos? How does Beis Shammai know this concept of 3 regular folk? How does he know that you can use 3 regular folk to annul a vow? So the Gemara says, Nafku Humi Rav Asi Bar Nasan. He derives it from Rav Asi Bar Nasan. That's how he knows that you could annul a vow with 3 regular folk, because it says there's a brisa that states. Let's go to this brisa, another opaque price. It says in the verse, it says in the Torah and Leviticus, Moshe spoke the festivals of God to the children of Israel. But really, we have a brisa that says, Rabbi Yosef literally Omer, Moadei Nemru, V'lo Nemrei Shabbos Bereshis Imahen. When it says these laws of these festivals, Moadei, it says the festivals, but it doesn't talk about Shabbos Bereshis. Shabbos Bereshis means Shabbos, so we call Shabbos. The Gemara here refers to it as the Shabbos of creation, because the festivals are also called Shabbos in certain places in the Torah. So Rabbi Yosef clearly says that this verse is referring to the festivals, but it doesn't talk about Shabbos there. Ben Azai says about this verse, Moadei Nemru, Lo Nemar Parshas Nedarim Imayin. The festivals are discussed, but not the passage of the vows. So Rav Asi Bar Nasan, Kashile, Rav Asi Bar Nasan was very bothered by this price, so it's very difficult. Kashile Amas Nisa. So also in Ardai, he came to the big yeshiva in Ardai, Kamed Rav Sheshes. He traveled all the way, Rav Asi Bar Nasan, he read a source and he's very bothered by it. He traveled all the way to Nardai. He knocked on the door. He says, I'm looking for Rav Sheshes. I want Rav Sheshes. I've traveled very far. I want Rav Sheshes to explain to me this brisa. He didn't find him. So he said, so he didn't even know how many of us, we read a book, we read a Gemara, we don't understand it. We say, okay, no big deal. Go back to sleep. No, that's not what Rav Asi Bar Nasan does. What does he do? He doesn't stop. He doesn't stop. What does he do? He gets up. He keeps going. He came to Mechoza. Amar Moadei Hashem Nemru V'lo Nemra Shabbos Bereshis Imayin. He says to Rav Sheshes, I don't understand this price. It says the festivals of God are said in the passage about Shabbos is not included with them, but it is included. If you look at that passage, the Torah starts there with the verses about the Shabbos Kodesh. Why do you say that the passage of Shabbos is not written with the festivals? And furthermore, V'sumo Adei Hashem Ne'amru. You say the festivals of God were written in the Torah without the vows, but we know that's not true because there's two separate passages. We start off by talking about the passage of the festivals in Emor. There's another passage of the festivals in Pinchas, and right after that passage is the laws of the vows. So of course the passage of the vows is said with them. It's said right at the end of passage of Pinchas. So I don't understand this brisa. So Taka Rav Sheshes responds to Rav Asi Bar Nasan. He says, okay, this is what the brisa means, and we're going back to now Beit Shammai. We want to know how Beit Shammai knows this answer that 3 Hedyotos also work, 3 regular folk also work to annul a vow. He says, because this is how we learn the brisa. Hachi Katani, this is how we learn the brisa. It states, Moadei Hashem, Tzrichin Kiddush Bezdin, Shabbos Bereshis in Shichin Kiddush Bezdin. That it says this is what the verse means. The festivals of God need the sanctification of a court, but the Shabbos of Hashem does not need the sanctification of the court. What does that mean? It means that if you want, how do we determine the festivals? We determine the festivals only through Rosh Chodesh. That Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the month, that determines when the festival is. But the Rosh Chodesh has to be established by a Bezdin, by a court. And so therefore the festivals of God are determined by a human court, whereas Shabbos is not determined by a human court. Shabbos is determined by God. God created the world, and on the 7th day was Shabbos Kodesh. So every 7th day is Shabbos. That comes from God, and has nothing to do with a human court. So that's why it says, Moadei Hashem, the festivals of God require the sanctification of the court. Whereas Shabbos Bereshis, the Shabbos does not need the sanctification of the court. And what do we learn from the second thing? Moadei Hashem tzrichin mumcha, Ve'im parashas Nedarim tzrichin mumcha. And the second thing we learn from it, from the fact that it's next to the passage of the vows, we learn is that the festivals of God, when we want to make Rosh Chodesh, we want to have the blessing to make Rosh Chodesh, they require a betin of experts. You need to be expert judges to determine when it's the new moon. And the passage of the vows, they don't require experts. Afilu bezin hedyotos, even a regular court. So that's how Beit Shammai has this idea that regular folk, 3 regular folk, can sit on a bezin to do a Taras Nedarim. Gemara says, "V'aparashas Nedarim Rashi Amatos Ksiv," but doesn't it say so? When they are discussing this brisa, presumably Rabbi Yossi Bar Natan says to Rav Sheshes, but doesn't it say in the passage of Nedarim Rashi Amatos, the heads of the tribes? How can you say it's regular folk? So I'm Rav Chizv Yitem Rabbi Yochanan. So it wasn't in front of Rav Sheshes because Rabbi Yochanan gives this answer. That means that you can have a head of the tribe do it. You don't need 3 judges, but that's only if you have an expert. Can a singular person do it? So now the Gemara continues. The Gemara said, we have been discussing this chapter, that when a husband hears a vow, he has till the end of the day to annul the vow. So is a dispute, is it till the end of that day, or does he have 24 hours? But b'yom shemo, the day he hears it. Now we're going to hear a shocking law. It's going to blow your mind. The shocking law. Amar Chanina. Let's say the husband is quiet. Hashoiteg almanas lamekat. Let's say he's quiet because he wants to torture her. What do you mean he wants to torture her? The Ran says kedei lahaknit ishto. Rahman he wants to give pain to his wife. She's going to think, oh, he's going to uphold my vows, but really the whole time he wants to quietly just torture her. He doesn't really want to uphold her vows. He wants to let her think he's upholding her vows, and then come in with a big rejection later on. This is a cruel man. So it says somebody who's quiet with the intent to hurt her, then shockingly he can actually have an extension to reject the vow. He has even up until 10 days to annul the vow. Why do we say this? We're saying because really he never really upheld the vow in his mind. It was all in his mind. So in his mind he had already annulled it, we'd have to say. So Masav Rava, so Rava challenges this. V'itema. So Rava challenges this. Rava says, Amasai Amru Mesa Bal Nisrok Norishus La'av. When did we say that if the husband dies, the rishus is given to the father? When do we say that? Amasai Amru Mesa Bal Nisrok Norishus La'av. When do we say that when the father dies, the authority is given to the father? Meaning, we said this, we've been discussing this many times, that the father and the husband can annul the vow together while she's betrothed. But if the husband dies, all the authority goes to the father, and he can annul it on his own. But when do we say that? When do we say that the father can annul the vow? Only in a circumstance where the husband hadn't heard it yet and affirmed it. Or he heard it and he was silent, he was neutral. Or he was heard it and he rejected it. And he dies that day. Let's say the husband heard the vow and he upheld the vow. Or he heard the vow and he was silent, and he died the next day. Then the father no longer has the ability to annul the vow, because when he was upheld the vow, then the husband acted. So even though he dies that same day, he already did an action to uphold the vow, so the father can no longer annul it. Or if he heard it and then was silent, waited till the next day, the father also has lost the right to annul it on his own, because the husband had acted and annulled the vow. Fine. But my love, when it says that he was silent and Shasach umeis biyom shel achar, so the Gemara says that case of the Brisa, that if he's silent and he dies on the next day, the husband can no longer annul the vow. Isn't that referring to the same case that we're talking about, where he was silent in order to harass her later on and reject the vow later on? And we see from here that that's considered an upholding of that. We see from here that is considered Malav Shosek Almanas Lamekat. Isn't that like he was quiet with the intent to torture her, to cancel her vow later on? Because it says Shama V'Shasa, because when it says that he was heard it and he was quiet, implies all types of silence are included in this. That's how the Ran explains it. And so with all this, the father is not able to reject the vow afterwards, because it says though the husband has exercised his right, and it's as though he upheld the vow. And so we see he can no longer reject it. So we see from here that if you're quiet with the intent to reject it later, you've lost your right to reject the vow. And not like this teaching of Rabbi Chanina. Gemara says, no, we're talking about here. Why has he lost the right to reject the vow? Well, he was silent with the intent to uphold it. That's why he lost the right. That's why he lost the right to ever annul the vow anymore. And that's why the father can't annul it. So the Gemara says, well, you can't say that. If that's the case, Hainu Oshama Vakim. Isn't that in fact the same thing we said earlier in the Brisa? The Brisa gives two scenarios where the father can annul it. The second one was where the husband heard it and was silent and died the next day. And we tried to say that was he heard it and was trying to torture her. We say no. So the Gemara says no, that was a case of shosek v'kiyim, where you uphold it. He was quiet in order to uphold it. The Gemara says, but you can't say that, because isn't that the first case? The first scenario is the first scenario that we just said is shama v'kiyim, is where he heard it in order to uphold it. So we can't say that the second case is also a case of where he heard it in order to uphold it. It must be the second case is where he heard it in order, and he was silent in order to torture her, but he didn't intend ever to uphold it. And still the Gemara says that he's lost the right to reject the vow. The Gemara says, no. The second case is b'shosek stam. He was quiet, neutral. If he was quiet and his intent was to be neutral, he didn't know if he was going to uphold it. He didn't know if he was going to reject it. Well, then guess what? He's out of luck. The next day he cannot annul the vow. But if he was silent and from the beginning his intent was to annul the vow after a period of time and just to torture her, then he would indeed be able to reject the vow later on. So that's today's daf. I'll be happy to take any questions.